Hey everyone, my name is Yvette and today we are together for a new video from the Meet the CloudStack community video series on YouTube. We have a guest today, Schulz from Vates. Charles is among our keynote speakers for the CloudStack Collaboration Conference 2023 and we are quite excited to meet him before the conference. Hey Charles, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Yvette. So my name is Schulz, and I'm in charge of the strategy for Vates. I've been involved in open source software for over 20 years, as well as cybersecurity. Very happy to be there.
You mentioned that you have been involved in the open source community for quite a lot of years. Can you explain a little bit more about your open source journey and the projects in which you have been involved so far?
Yes, I've basically discovered free and open source software in the early 2000s, in fact, in 2000 exactly. And at that time, it was about Mandrakesoft and Mandrake Linux and Linux distribution. But I quickly also got involved in the OpenOffice project, to which I worked and contributed on the community level and international development for quite a while. And then I took part in the journey to create the document foundation, the LibreOffice project. But I also did a few things besides working on the ODF standardization initiatives and ODF implementation, as well as a couple of other projects. Then I basically did a few things on open source cybersecurity, been involved in the Suricata IDS project, as well as a few other things. And I contributed a few things and a few Emacs projects.
And from where is this passion about open source technologies coming?
I think it's essentially the promise of open source and the fact that you can basically join any project, as long as you want to contribute, that you know how to contribute, or that you can study enough to contribute, and essentially what you give, you get back tenfold, as I'm used to say.
Interesting. You have quite interesting title for your keynote talk, which, if I remember correctly, was "Open Source is Not Dead." So, what do you mean here?
Well, I think that we live through, let's say, interesting times because, at least in Europe, what we're facing with is essentially what can be understood as an attack on open source through several fronts. And sometimes, let's say, it doesn't have to be an attack, or it's not actually an attack, but what's happening is you have the conflation and the confluence of several things happening. So you got legislations and regulation that is maybe not hostile to open source, but let's say at the European level, something which is not taking fully into account the specificity of open source projects and open source actors, let's say, in general. And then you have, let's just put it that way, you have a strong temptation by some corporations, large corporations, to take the term open source, void it of its actual meaning, and use it as just a pure marketing buzzword, if you will. And this is not happening, let's say, from within the open source community. This is actually happening elsewhere at the level of international standardization bodies, there and a few other places. And what we're seeing essentially is that there is a zeitgeist that would have us believe that now open source doesn't really matter, because all of this, and anyway now there's things such as AI, and it's coming to change everything. Now there's a lot of exciting things happening with artificial intelligence and open source, and I believe that all the rest, if anything, is a testament to the success and the popularity of open source software. And I'm going to basically, kind of give a kind of a weather map, if you will, of where we stand and where open source stands in terms of opportunities and threats and challenges on all these topics.
One of the things which you maybe mean is, for example, the EU Cyber Resilience Act and its potential effect on open source technologies. We all know that that's quite a buzz currently, quite an issue. Can you please comment on it and share your opinion about what will be its effects on the open source world?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that my opinion is really not necessarily a popular one inside the field of open source, simply because I've been working with cybersecurity on a governmental level for quite many years. And I understand that there are, let's say, we cannot be naive when it comes to cybersecurity and the reality of these cyber threats, whether it's coming from criminal networks or whether it's coming from nation actors. And cybersecurity has to be taken very seriously. Now, what's happening with the CRA, first of all, we have to really keep in mind that at this stage, nothing is properly set in stone yet. We have a series of drafts. The process at the level of the European institutions is still going on. So, we have to take all this with a grain of salt. Now, I think that what really happened with the CRA, so the Cyber Resilience Act, is that this was an attempt to secure and really implement one common unified software security audit and, let's say, trust scheme across the European Union and across the industrial sectors. And, this is not actually the first time. And this is not the only place where this is happening. You see this happening in the United States. You see this happening in Asia. You see this happening everywhere, really. But where it became sort of a problem is that how open source was handled, so to speak, was basically that it was basically a almost a journalistic view of open source in a sense, because it failed to completely, it just missed the point. It missed the point on several counts. First of all, it missed the point of the specific, I would say, the specificities of open source. Most notoriously, I would say, and this is something that I personally went to explain to a few people at the European level. First of all, that there is the public availability of the software code, source code and binary code. And then it failed to take into account the fact that at the very end of the day, software today, and especially open source software, is developed through, it's not developed in a void. You have all sorts of tools. You have quality assurance. It just doesn't get released by someone in his or her proverbial garage, and then there's going to be a bug. Yes, there is going to be a bug. Yes, there are going to be vulnerabilities, and yes, I fully agree that we should have a proper set of understanding of what's going to happen when it comes to vulnerability assessment, detection, and response, if you will. So the CRA is really trying to do all this, and I think that the way they try to do this is very interesting, because they try to have this cross-sectorial approach to it. But I don't think this is really the best one. It's probably a valuable one because it has, let's just say, a large spectrum answer. But to put together companies who've got their software development hosted on a public GitHub or GitLab or whatever repository on the one hand, and companies who sell electronic toothbrush, because that's exactly one of the examples that were considered by the CRA. Let's say it has its limits. Let me just put it that way. And in doing so, they completely went over the specificities of open source. And they treated this almost as well, you're either a company or you're a hobbyist. And, here we go again. We're into well, you can do this and that without being checked too much if you're just an amateur, and that you're going to do this on your free time in the weekend. Well, it just doesn't work that way. And it's a view which is uninformed. And it's bad, because open source is fundamentally a true opportunity for the European innovation. So I'm thinking and I'm hoping that things will be better, let's say, when it comes to CRA, uh, which again is not a bad move in itself.
Based on your long-term vision over the market, how is open source technology changing over the years and in the past decade?
Well, I think that what you're seeing is so you basically have, so there is still very strong diversity in who develops what, let's say, when it comes to open source software. However, I will say this, I will say that what you basically have is probably more structured communities with a more structured governance on the one hand, and you also have more, let's say, sophisticated, let's say, you have a more sophisticated approach to software development with continuous integration. You have automated testings. Now, those things are not exactly new, but they tend to be a lot more generalized, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back 10 years ago, even 20 years ago, none of these things were, really a thing. So that's part of, but this is kind of coming back to what we were saying about the CRA. This is exactly what that regulation, the first regulation drafts were missing. It's how much evolved and how much more emphasis on the quality of what you're releasing things have become. And so the open source development have improved a lot when it comes to these methods and this transparency and traceability of the components. So, things have become, let's say, they've taken that way. And I'm very happy to see that. Also, one thing which is quite interesting is that now you see open source software being developed and distributed and used in so many more areas than before. Before, you would have seen this in the field of university research, server software, maybe enterprise middleware, these kind of things. But now it's just everywhere, and I'm very happy about this.
Good. It's good that the open source technology is spreading because it really gives quite big potential and big opportunities for companies, but also for developers around the world to join some interesting IT project and to develop a career there. According to you, what is the future of open source technologies? Where do you see them in the next 10 years in terms of governance, in terms of cybersecurity?
Well, I think what you're going to see in the next 10 years, I don't have a crystal ball, of course, but what you're going to see is a larger emphasis on automation and artificial intelligence, because that is effectively, so if you will, artificial intelligence, you get a lot of things when it comes to, first of all, how you develop this, the number of open source initiatives that are essentially happening in the field of artificial intelligence. But artificial intelligence is really going to be a cross-sector thing. So you're going to have more automation, but you're going to have a lot more AI-based automation, and you're going to see a lot of things happening in the field of open source on these in this field, for instance. You're also going to have, I think, a real kind of a rebirth or a renaissance, if you will, of I would say server software, but like a lot more innovation when it comes to hardware. So we can see this already. We can see that now, basically, if you basically develop something for the server or for the digital infrastructure, such as Vates, you really have to kind of take into account the fact that it's not just about x86 anymore. You need to be thinking about ARM, you need to be thinking about RISC-V. And so you see all these kind of new things happening in the field of hardware. You see these kind of things happening in the field of, porting certain software on new architectures. And it's become fascinating again, because we're going out of the certain hardware type of monoculture. And therefore, you see a lot more innovation when it comes to hardware and software integrations and hardware in general.
Quite interesting. It will be really cool to meet you at the CloudStack Collaboration Conference, and I'm pretty sure that people are expecting your talk. Can you
Thank you.
share why you decided to join the event and what the attendees can expect out of your talk and out of the participation of Vates?
Well, Vates is very happy to join the conference. Vates has an entire stack that addresses and handles digital infrastructure management and virtualization through its Vates management stack. And what we're seeing is effectively that the CloudStack crowd, if you will, is very much in tune with what we are working on in terms of projects and also in terms of initiatives. So, I definitely am looking forward to the conference. I hope that if I can get let's say, one message across to the audience, is to actually a message of hope and excitement that in fact the challenges that we're facing today are challenges that need to be addressed for sure, but that we have so much more going on in the future. So we definitely should be looking forward to these.
Sounds quite inspiring. Thank you very much, Charles, for being with us today, and
Thank
look
you.
forward to meet you in Paris for the CloudStack Collaboration Conference.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
So do you